Do you want to see how you can crush the King's Indian? Then keep watching. Remember, if you're not a subscriber to the channel, then click on the subscribe button down there. And if you want to help us keep the lights on, there are links to PayPal and Patreon.com as well. We'd be grateful for your support. Right, on with this game. This was played in the World Team Championships, the women's section, which was won convincingly by the Chinese team. And here we see one of the most successful players on the team, Lei Tingjie, who scored 7 out of 8. She was Chinese women's champion in 2017 and one of the many strong women players in China, of course. Top woman in the world is Ho Yifan, and the current world champion is Zhu Wenjun. And during this event, there was Tan Zhongyi was very successful as well, another very strong player. So Lei Tingjie against Assaubayeva from Kazakhstan. It's a King's Indian, as I mentioned at the top, and I really like the system that Tingjie plays here, which is with h3. Now, black continues in the traditional way, so now we've got this locked pawn centre. And we're going to see the point of playing h3 now, and that is to play g4. So the idea is that white really cramps black on the king side, and it makes it very difficult if this knight were to move back. It's still quite difficult to get in f5 because this would open up the g file and open up this diagonal as well, and that makes life very dangerous for black. So usually black heads for counterplay on the other side of the board. Yes, there's a really nice game played by Ding Liren from this position, actually. That's for another time. But knight d7 played. And knight c5. So black is doing all the kind of usual things. I mean, it wasn't absolutely necessary to play the knight back, but anyway, that's what's happened. And rook g1. So you can see that, well, maybe black was thinking about playing f5, but after rook g1 had second thoughts, I think understandably, as the g file would open, and that looks a bit fraught. a4. Okay, this looks pretty good to gain some control over this square, but knight d2 covers b3. c6 and queen a5. So it looks as though black is starting to get some counterplay going on the queen side, but actually white is pretty solid. And here Tingjie decides to castle queenside. It's actually not strictly necessary to move the king straight away. I've seen h4 played in this position, and just continuing this cramping on the king side, and that's also a pretty good way to play the position. In any case, castle's queenside. Now I think, for better or for worse, black has to try and generate counterplay on the queen side and just give up a pawn here. Let white take this, but just open lines. That can be taken with knight or bishop. White could also recapture with the e-pawn. That's possible. But black, I think, hesitated here. I think in this position you've got to be decisive. But knight f6 is heading backwards, and I think white just has a fantastic position now. So this was the idea from black, to exchange on d5 and wanted to cover the d5 square with the knight, but it wasn't strictly necessary to do that. And this is very interesting. Normally you would think of recapturing with the c-pawn, but actually recapturing this way opens up this diagonal and also keeps the white pawn on c4, which means it's harder for black to gain counterplay with b5 and keeps white's king more secure. Bishop d7 played, and white continues the squeeze on the king side with g5. Now, if that knight retreats, let's see here, then bishop g4, and white is taken control in this position. So bishop g4 obviously prevents the bishop coming to f5, and after the exchange, well, we could even exchange here and put a knight on e4, and that's just a wonderful blockade. Or perhaps play the knight into e4 straight away. There's also the h-pawn ready to advance up the board to open up the h-file as well. Positionally really nice for white. But here, after g5, well, player of the black pieces had obviously prepared this move, bishop f5, and probably just assumed that she was doing okay here. But she had completely underestimated this move. Queen takes bishop, and this is absolutely crushing. If pawn takes queen, then you take on f6, and then you can take here. So black played knight e4, which means the queen, well, it's still on prise. If the queen were to retreat, it's possible, but suddenly black has a bit of counterplay here. In fact, it's still okay for white, but the game continuation is so much stronger. Tingjie decided to just give up the queen. No messing around, and this is an excellent decision. So she now has 3 minor pieces for the queen. But more than that, white has complete security, complete control over the centre of the board. In fact, over the whole board, because white controls the centre. So there is no chance of a counter-attack against the king. This knight is supreme, looking over into black's position. The queen can do nothing. The rooks can do nothing, actually, because they don't have open files. This pawn attacked, defended, attacked again. Bishop f8 defends. Now, black has no counterplay, so white simply decided to roll up the board with the h-pawn. I mean, it's a very funny position. Rook c8, threatening queen takes knight, so the king just steps to the side. And black has absolutely nothing to do. It's such a comical position. White can just take time here. And rook f1. There's actually no hurry in this position, because white is so dominant. And now f4. Simple idea to encouraging black to open up the long diagonal, and then that bishop comes into play. But black didn't want to do that. I mean, I'm not quite sure what queen a6 achieves, but there really is nothing for black to do here. It is miserable. And white advances again. Threat f6. Exchange, and the king is in big trouble. You can see that black has no space to maneuver. And now f7 is falling. And it just goes. I mean, it's pitiful, actually. And bishop g4 was the final move of the game. Black decided to resign. Unsurprisingly, if rook takes pawn, then bishop check, king goes in the corner, and rook f8 and mate next move. Or let's see, rook b8, bishop e6, check, and rook f7. I mean, white can just step into the position without any problem at all. There is simply nothing to do. So g6 could be the next move, followed by bishop g5, and I think that, and bishop f6 check, and mate follows shortly. I mean, it's a comical position. I think this shows you very well what can go wrong with the King's Indian. if white gets control, black has very little space to maneuver. And this is why so many of the top players have actually stopped playing the King's Indian, because you only need to make one slip and it just looks miserable. Black is so passive. Now, of course, black really played poorly here and made, if I go back to this position, made a big tactical mistake with bishop f5. But even so, this kind of position here, it is very, very difficult to break out of this for black. Remember, if you want to support the channel, then please do check out PayPal or patreon.com. And actually, for those that contribute $25 a month, I actually provide, among many other things, I provide an opening survey and each month. And I actually looked at this h3 move in some detail, because I think it is a very dangerous system against the King's Indian. Thanks very much for watching. See you soon.